I found some research that I thought would be helpful, and I wanted to share it.
It would surprise you to a great degree just how much the American people are no longer in touch with what their basic, common, unalienable rights actually are. We've been indoctrinated into surrendering them to the state and to those that we judge to be in authority over us for far too long. It's probably one of the biggest reasons for government-controlled schools is simply because this indoctrination process has to be done slowly, because what they're telling us about what we have as far as rights are concerned and how they actually treat us in regard to those rights are very much in contrast and in contradiction to each other.
Despite actions of police and local courts, higher courts have ruled that American citizens have a right to travel without state permits. Now, the word citizen is a whole nother situation we can get into later. Police officers and court officials are becoming aware that there are court decisions that disprove the belief that driving is a privilege and therefore requires government approval in the form of a license.
The right of a citizen to travel upon public highways and to transport his property thereon in the ordinary course of life and business is a common right which he has under his right to enjoy life and liberty, to acquire and possess property, and to pursue happiness and safety. It includes the right in doing so to use the ordinary and usual conveyances of the day, and under the existing modes of travel includes the right to drive a horse-drawn carriage or wagon thereon, or to operate an automobile thereon, for the usual and ordinary purposes of life and business. It is not a mere privilege like the privilege of moving a house in the street, operating a business stand in the street, or transporting persons or property for hire along the street, which a city may permit or prohibit at will.
This right is protected under the U.S. Constitution. The right to travel is part of the liberty in which the citizen cannot be deprived without due process of law under the Fifth Amendment. Here's another one. The right to travel, to go from place to place as the means of transportation permit, is the natural right. A restraint imposed by the government of the United States upon this liberty, therefore, must conform with the provision of the Fifth Amendment that no person shall be deprived of liberty without due process of law. American citizens do indeed have the inalienable right to use the roadways unrestricted in any manner as long as they are not damaging or violating property or the rights of others. And that's an important thing. Your rights end where someone else's rights begin, so you can't trample on someone else's rights. People have been doing this for the past 2 years non-stop.
You should not be allowed to have a mask.
Okay.
No, it most certainly is not okay. You're being selfish. If you're not going to wear a mask, you shouldn't be allowed to get the...
Because they feel like, or they think that, they've been told that they can enforce ordinances against everyday people. Anyways, that case law is overwhelming in determining that to restrict the movement of the individual in the free exercise of his right to travel is a serious breach of those freedoms secured by the U.S. Constitution and most state constitutions. That means it is unlawful.
One of the major rules I stress vehemently to the people in my class is you're no longer in the world of rights and safety. You're in a world of government intolerance of the very people that empower and create it. So, never leave home ever again without some form of recording device with you. Don't leave home without something that records. Police officers are being trained to treat us as the enemy. They are first and foremost the ones you have to watch out for. Never talk with a peace officer, police officer, or any other type of officer if you're not recording the encounter. The first one is, do remember that an officer is required to read you your rights before questioning or searching you if they have placed you in a custodial arrest. Now, one of the things that most people in Texas do not know is that every time you are stopped for an alleged transportation stop, you are already in a custodial arrest. They will always tell you, however, that you're not under arrest. They will tell you that you're in a custodial detention. This is a lie. The reason they're doing this is to get you to start talking freely. Because under arrest, you're liable to watch what you say. Under arrest, they have to read you your rights, which is what this is dealing with. If they don't tell you that and you just talk freely, then anything you say can and will be used against you, and you can't get it suppressed later because the court will view it as a voluntary statement.
The U.S. Supreme Court states very plainly, the state cannot diminish rights of the people. Statutes that violate the plain and obvious principles of common right and common reason are null and void. Where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rule making or legislation that could abrogate them. That's Miranda v. Arizona. The claim and exercise of a constitutional right cannot thus be converted into a crime. Miller v. U.S. There can be no sanction or penalty imposed upon one because of his exercise of constitutional rights. Scherer v. Cullen. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land. Now, it's important, if you're not already well informed about the three jurisdictions, land, air, water, the fact that the land is mentioned is extremely important. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary, notwithstanding. If we're going to follow the letter of the law, as we're all sworn to do, this places officials who involve themselves in such unlawful acts in an unfavorable legal situation, for it is a felony and a federal crime to violate or deprive citizens of their constitutionally protected rights.
Don't ever answer an officer's questions. There's no requirement for you to answer their questions. I don't care what they tell you. There's no requirement for you to give them anything that they want. Yes, Texas law says you have to give them a license, you have to give them registration, you have to give them proof of insurance. Problem, that's a due process violation. The law is attempting to make it mandatory that you waive a protected right in order to exercise some alleged privilege or exercise an actual right of another type. Don't be saying and doing anything that helps them and hurts you. That is the reason why I have a major 3-part rule about everything here, and that is everything that comes out of your mouth has to be directed to one of 3 specific purposes: invoking a right, demanding a right, or protecting a right. That you are not to provide any information or documents in response to the officer's demands or questions. That means you don't give him a license, you don't give him registration, you don't give him proof of insurance or anything else. They can't compel you to waive your right to remain silent and not to self-incriminate in order to meet their requirement of tell me that you have what I want. Because what they want is for you to allow them to get you in that vice of pay us money or we'll come after you for more money. Any information or documents in response to the officer's demands or questions is going to hurt you. Invoke your fundamentally protected right to remain silent and to assistance of counsel, and then simply refuse to waive those rights. How do we do that? Well, you waive it because you complied with the officer's demands. The moment you comply, it's waived. You're done. It's over. You cannot get that back. You cannot ask the information be suppressed because the courts will say you gave it up voluntarily. The foremost thing to remember in these situations is to not engage the officers in idle conversation, dialogue, or chit-chat. Why? Because the more comfortable you are and the more talkative you become, the more likely you are to say or do something that's going to hurt you somewhere down the line, or that will give this officer more information he needs to conduct what he's going to refer to as articulable probable cause or a heightened reasonable suspicion to say that you were doing something more illegal or that would give him an opportunity to go fishing down a different path. Any question the officer asks, like where are you coming from, where are you going, who are you meeting, they have nothing to do with the stop. Stop answering those questions. It's none of his business. He has no right or authority to know that. Also, never answer questions like, do you know why I pulled you over? Or are you aware that? You stop helping this guy screw you over. That's what he's doing. When he asks those types of questions and you answer, what are you doing? You're giving him evidence. Well, yeah, I guess you caught me speeding back there or running that stop sign or going through that red light. Thank you for the confession that he has on his audio-video recording and we'll use against you in a court of law. Stop answering questions. Just don't. You do need to remember to do the following immediately when you realize you're getting pulled over. First and foremost, roll up all of your windows and lock all of your doors. Okay, why? Because these guys are getting more aggressive every day about jumping in your car without any probable cause, coming in from the passenger side, your side, and just pulling you out of the car for no good reason, yanking your keys out of the ignition and refusing to give them back, any of those things. Roll your windows all the way up, lock all of your doors. That keeps them outside and you inside until they can give a viable reason why that needs to change. Don't give them the opportunity to do that. Do remember, however, that my objective here is not to get anyone hurt or injured. You have to use your own judgment as to how far you're willing to press your rights and keep them. That's entirely an individual requirement. You and only you know the situation you're in at the time. You and only you have reason to believe this officer is going to lose control and do something that will seriously injure you. You need to take that into consideration whatever happens, okay? But that being said, you need to be very careful that it gets to a point that is documented that you did not waive that right willingly, that you were forced to do it. Don't ever roll down more than one window at a time if you do remain in your car when you get stopped. No matter what the officer tells you to do, one window only. I don't care if there's cops at every window saying roll this down, don't do it. One window only. Why? Well, if you create more than one air vent in that car by rolling down multiple windows, you will create a cross breeze inside of that car. If you do that, that immediately gives the officer the opportunity to say he smells something coming from the car. With a single window down, that is impossible. Nothing can exit the car in that manner. There's no wind to blow it out the window for this officer to allegedly smell. So don't ever do that, because the first thing he's going to do when he can't get what he wants one way is he's going to attempt to escalate the stop and get it another. Don't ever roll your one open window down more than 2 and 2.5 inches. Again, no matter what the officer tells you. If he tells you you have to roll your window all the way down, just sit there and say, officer, I like the window where it is. I can hear you just fine. I'm comfortable with it right here. I don't want to roll it all the way down. I'm not going to roll it all the way down. There's no law that requires you to do that. Now, be aware that he will get upset by this, and he will attempt to threaten you, but he's not at a point yet where he can actually justify anything he does that consists of violence. Don't ever give your consent to an officer to search your car for any reason. That's just dumb. Don't do it. Without a warrant, they don't have a reason to search your car unless they actually put you in the back of theirs with the intent of taking you to a magistrate, which is where they're supposed to take you, even though they take you directly to jail. You need to be aware that that also is illegal in most states, including Texas, and that you can sue them for false imprisonment when they do that. But that's beyond the scope of this presentation. If you give them consent, here's the potential downside. You are asking for the incriminating evidence to get planted in your car, or evidence that you may not have even known was in your car to be discovered. Don't consent to a search that doesn't have a warrant attached to it. Just don't. This is the key reason you don't get out of your car, because they have to have a really good reason, such as actually saying, we're taking you with us, in order to get into that car to perform a search without that warrant. The search incident to arrest requirement that allows them to do it without a warrant, even though you're in a custodial arrest, they're lying to you about that and haven't informed you of that. So if they attempt to search the car at this point, the search can get thrown out and suppressed as being illegal, and they know it. All right, the officer is going to almost always insist you are not under custodial arrest, but rather are simply being detained or are part of an investigative detention. Again, that's a lie. No officer has the authority to simply walk up and demand that you answer questions, produce ID, or provide them with your private information, but they're going to try to do that, okay? So it doesn't matter whether they're doing it verbally, it doesn't matter whether they're demanding you give it to them in the physical form on an ID. They can't just walk up and demand it, and you're not required to give it to them. Be aware that when you won't submit and give them your information, though, their favorite tactic is to start threatening you, and they're going to start trying to say they're going to charge you with failure to identify, which here in Texas is one of their favorites. But the problem is, when you read the failure to identify statute, there's only specific ways to commit that offense. And in either case, in order to charge you for not providing information, the officer is required to have already arrested you for some other type of offense. Failure to identify is not an arrestable offense in and of itself, except in the subpart B, where it gives the requirement that you don't provide false information in a legal detention. But notice the contrast. In a legal detention, you can't give false information, but you can refuse to give any. Whereas in a lawful arrest for some other offense, you shouldn't give false information and don't, but they also, at that point, they say you can't refuse to give them name, address, and date of birth. And that is the only 3 pieces of information you're required to give. But nowhere are you required to provide that information at any time on a physical form of ID. You don't have to do it with a license. You don't have to do it with a passport. You don't have to do it with any form of physical identification. Verbal is enough, as long as you provide those 3 pieces of information if you've been lawfully arrested or detained. Now, Once you know the officer's name and his badge number, you're going to use that as often as possible while you're going down the things in this script. Why? Because you want that officer associated with every illegal activity you can get him into while he's got you. So you want to directly relate him and what he's doing to some violation of your rights at every single opportunity. That also makes any video record self-authenticating. Question 1. For the record, may I get your name and badge number, please? This is the first thing you ask when the officer approaches your car window. You want to know who it is you're dealing with and how to identify them. Make sure that your recording catches their name and badge number. That makes your recording self-authenticating. Immediately, let's just say, for instance, the officer said his name is Davis and his badge number is 123. Officer Davis, badge ID 123, is there recording being made of this encounter? Again, you want him to tell you whether or not he's making an official record of this. You know, when you ask for this information and they say, well, we didn't make a recording or the equipment was malfunctioning, these 3 things will help you prove that's a lie if you got an answer to them on your recording. So these are optional, but potentially helpful. Officer Davis, badge number 123, what is the emergency and how can I help you? Again, we're not going to assume we did anything wrong. We're not engaged in transportation. We're not commercial. Therefore, his authority to pull us over for some alleged offense under that code is non-existent. Therefore, we have to ask, why are you stopping me? Do you have a problem and do you need me to help you? Because in Texas and most other republics, they can ask for help from the people to subdue a criminal or things of that nature, and you're required to help if you can. So we're going to ask. Officer Davis, badge number 123, what facts or information are you alleging gave you probable cause to stop and accost me? Right there, we're asking the officer to validate his authority. What alleged facts are you relying on as your authority to do what you're doing to me right now? Now, of course, he's going to cite immediately something related to transportation. When we get to trial, that's going to become very important, not only in our defense, but also in our federal lawsuit when we sue everybody in the food chain after this case is over. Officer Davis, badge number 123, do you have a properly signed and issued warrant authorizing you to search me or my property? Again, documenting the right. Do you have a warrant? And this warrant specifically directed at searching, okay? Can you search me or my property? If he says yes, simply ask to see a copy of the warrant. Texas law is now written where the officer is not required to have the warrant in his possession.
So this is a travel document that's a part of a travel kit. And you can find this travel kit at commonlawamerica.wordpress.com. And basically everything you need to know is right in there to get that paperwork. So I'll just click on that travel notice, download, and all your information, you just fill in the red portions, and that's pretty much it. It has the full script for American nationals, people that are not sovereign citizens, because that is a oxymoron. You cannot be a sovereign and a citizen, because a citizen is a slave, but or a servant rather. You get the picture. And all the constitutional rights. Some documents that you would hand to a policy officer. Hopefully you're dealing with a law enforcement officer and not a policy officer, but I digress. Here's a letter from the state senator Wayne Stump that was written December 10th, 1985. It has come to my attention that numerous individuals in our state have rescinded all of their contracts with the United States federal government, the state of Arizona, and each of its political subdivisions, establishing themselves as free men under the organic national constitution of the Republic of the United States of America. Consequently, they may be driving without auto registration, driver's license, or any other evidence of contract. Because many law enforcement personnel may be unaware of the contractual nature of auto registration and driver's license, it is conceivable that this situation may lead to confrontation between these individuals and law enforcement personnel. I urge you to inform yourself and your personnel about this matter as soon as possible.